Ever feel like you're sprinting just to keep up with what's happening in your own city? Well, today we're strapping on our metaphorical headlamps and spelunking into the fascinating, sometimes perplexing world of the Austin City Council. We're doing a deep dive into the minutes from their July 18th, 2024 meeting. No coffee breaks, just pure civic adrenaline.
Think of it less like reading a boring meeting report and more like finding a treasure map. These minutes are packed with clues about Austin's priorities, tensions, and where the city might be headed.
And trust me, it's way more interesting than it sounds. We're talking millions of dollars, quirky projects, and even a glimpse into how decisions get made when they think nobody's watching.
We're diving into the regular council meeting from July 18th, 2024. You'll see how seemingly small details can unlock a deeper understanding of the city's direction.
All right, let's kick things off with something you might not expect: proclamations. We're talking Disability Pride Day, Gun Safety Awareness Month, even Wildland Urban Interface Training Day.
Proclamations are interesting because they're less about actual policy and more about sending a message. It's the council's way of highlighting specific issues or concerns they want on the public radar.
So it's kind of like the city council's version of a billboard, broadcasting what matters to them at that moment.
Exactly. Now let's move on to the consent agenda, and don't worry, I'll explain what that is in a sec. This part's fascinating because it reveals what the council considers a total no-brainer, the stuff they approve in bulk without much discussion.
Okay, so for those of us who haven't spent much time in City Hall, what exactly is a consent agenda?
Imagine you're at the grocery store with a list as long as your arm. You wouldn't spend time debating every single item, right? The consent agenda is like that. It bundles routine, non-controversial stuff together so the council can focus on bigger debates.
Efficiency at its finest. So what hidden gems did we unearth from this particular consent agenda?
Well, item 2 immediately caught my eye. It involved the city purchasing something called an easement for electric lines, which sounds simple enough, but the price tag. A cool $106,839.
Whoa, that's a lot of cash for what I imagine is just a little strip of land. What's going on there?
That's the question. An easement basically gives someone the legal right to use a specific part of someone else's land, often for utilities or access roads. The price makes you wonder if this is part of a larger infrastructure play, especially when we see
Items 24 and 59, both dealing with property acquisition for the city, but listed separately on the agenda. Are we seeing the pieces of a bigger puzzle here?
you got it. It suggests a connection, a strategic land grab, if you will, that the council is piecing together bit by bit. These seemingly small details can actually reveal a lot about where the city is putting its resources and how it plans to grow.
It's like they're playing city building SimCity in real life, and we're getting a peek behind the curtain. Now, speaking of spending big bucks, let's talk about something a little closer to my heart: public art.
Ah, yes, items 10 through 13, a cluster all focused on bringing some artistic flair to various city facilities. We're talking sculptures, murals, maybe even some avant-garde interpretive dance, who knows.
Okay, maybe not the dance, but you can see they're putting a clear emphasis on integrating art into everyday life, which I love. But I'm also seeing dollar signs flashing in my head. This must be sparking some debate among taxpayers, right?
Definitely. And this is where those individual council member votes, neatly recorded in the minutes, become super interesting. We see Councilmember Kelly voted nay on all these art-related expenditures.
So we're seeing that tension play out: artistic vision versus fiscal responsibility. Makes you realize how every decision, even about something like a sculpture, can be a balancing act for the council.
Precisely. And speaking of big decisions and potential balancing acts, let's talk about Colony Park.
Items 21 and 22, along with the postponed item 9, all revolve around Colony Park. And we're not talking pocket change here. These add up to a whopping $121 million investment in the area.
Colony Park, for those unfamiliar, is this huge planned community in East Austin. It's been in the works for a while, and this funding is essentially about laying the groundwork for its future.
So what does $121 million worth of groundwork actually look like? We're talking roads, utilities, that sort of thing.
Absolutely, the essential infrastructure that makes a place livable. Think of it as building the skeleton of a whole neighborhood's streets, water lines, sewer systems, power grids. But it's not just about practicality. It's about setting the stage for what Colony Park will become.
Okay, so this is starting to feel less like a budget line item and more like city planning on a massive scale.
Exactly. And this is where those seemingly disparate threads from the consent agenda start to weave together. Remember that expensive easement for electric lines. It could very well be connected to this larger vision for Colony Park, ensuring the area has the power capacity to support a growing community.
Wow, it's like those connect the dots puzzles, but for city planning. It makes you realize how much thought and money goes into shaping these communities.
Right. It's about anticipating needs years down the line, which also means weighing the potential benefits and drawbacks very carefully.
What kind of trade-offs are we talking about here?
Well, the potential upsides are pretty clear in new housing job creation, a boost to the local economy. But there's also the cost to consider. $121 million is a significant chunk of taxpayer money, and it raises questions about how those funds could be used elsewhere.
And what about the people who already call East Austin home?
That's another crucial piece of the puzzle. As areas like Colony Park develop, there's always a risk of gentrification, longtime residents being priced out as property values rise. It highlights the challenge of balancing growth with affordability and ensuring that development benefits everyone, not just newcomers.
So just one decision about infrastructure funding unlocks this whole web of interconnected issues. It's a lot more complex than just laying down some pipes and pavement.
Absolutely. And it showcases why these council minutes can be so insightful. They offer a glimpse into the delicate dance of city planning, where every move has a ripple effect.
It's like a game of chess, but instead of pawns and rooks, we're talking about parks, power lines, and people's lives.
Exactly. And speaking of that delicate dance, let's shift gears for a moment and do a quick rundown of some other intriguing decisions from the meeting, just to showcase the range of issues the council tackles.
Sounds good. Variety is the spice of civic life, after all. Let's start with something that directly affects people's wallets. Item 17, the proposed rate hike for natural gas. This one feels like a classic good news, bad news situation. What are the arguments at play here?
Well, on the surface, suspending a rate hike sounds great for consumers, right? Especially with the cost of, well, everything going up. It's a way for the council to provide some financial relief to residents. But it also begs the question, what happens down the line?
Right, delaying a price increase now could mean a bigger jump later on, not to mention the potential impact on the city's budget for maintaining those gas lines and services. Tough call.
Exactly. It highlights how the council is always trying to strike that balance between short-term relief and long-term planning. Now, for something completely different, item 48, which caught my eye because it involves furry friends.
Always a good day when we're talking about furry friends. What's the city council got to do with our four-legged residents?
This item was about securing funding for community spay and neuter services. On the one hand, it's a common-sense approach to managing stray animal populations, which benefits both the animals and the community.
Definitely. Nobody wants to see stray animals struggling on the streets.
Exactly. But it also prompts a larger conversation about responsible pet ownership and the role of government in promoting it.
So it's not just about fixing a problem, it's about preventing it in the first place. All right, last but not least, let's talk about item 63, which involves a redevelopment project with a focus on affordable housing.
This one's particularly interesting because it touches on a huge issue in Austin right now, the rising cost of living and the need for more affordable housing options.
It feels like everyone's talking about affordability these days. What can a single redevelopment project really do to move the needle on such a big issue?
It's true, one project won't solve the entire problem. But this item shows the city is actively trying to incentivize developers to incorporate affordable units into their plans. It's about creating mixed-income communities rather than just luxury apartments that price out longtime residents.
So it's a step in the right direction, but also a reminder of how much work is left to be done on the affordable housing front. It's like we've uncovered this whole hidden world behind the scenes of city government.
It's easy to feel disconnected from those processes, but these decisions have a very real impact on our daily lives.
Absolutely. And speaking of connecting with local government, there's one more item I want to touch on, item 95, which is all about citizen engagement.
Ah, yes, a perfect example of how these meeting minutes often point to opportunities for public involvement. This item dealt with setting a public hearing for the East 6th Street Public Improvement District.
For those of us who haven't memorized the entire city map, what exactly is a public improvement district?
Basically, it's a defined area where property owners agree to pay an extra tax to fund improvements within that district. Things like landscaping, lighting, even increased security.
So this item wasn't about deciding on those improvements. It was about giving people a chance to weigh in on the plans.
Exactly. It's like sending up the bat signal for civic engagement. And this happens all the time. City council meetings, public hearings, community forums, these are all avenues for residents to make their voices heard.
It reminds me of that quote, democracy is not a spectator sport. It takes active participation, right? So to our listener out there, maybe you're thinking, okay, this has been fascinating and all, but what's the takeaway for me?
I think the biggest takeaway is that these meetings, these minutes, they're not just about bureaucratic procedures. They're about the future of our city. And that future is being shaped, in part, by the decisions made in those rooms.
We saw millions of dollars being allocated for infrastructure in Colony Park, for public art installations for spay and neuter programs. These are choices that have a real impact on our community, on the Austin we all experience every day.
And those choices are being made by our elected officials, based on the information they have and the voices they hear. So, as a citizen, as someone who lives in and cares about this city, begs the question, are you part of that conversation?
That feels like the perfect note to end on a little food for thought, a call to action. If this deep dive into the Austin City Council minutes has sparked your curiosity, don't just sit there. Go explore the city's website, find out when the next meeting is, see how you can get involved. Because as we learned today, even the seemingly mundane details can reveal a lot about the forces shaping our community. And who knows, you might even find it surprisingly fascinating.
Until next time, stay curious.